Yeah, the president of the union is arguing that you only get the immediate.
In television.
In the immediate, in this clip that they have in the video. So that the pre needed to be seen. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
But it's linked to the corporate way in a way that YouTube is not. All they do is maintain copyright. Yes. They can do that algorithmically. Yes. So it's got a character that makes it the medium of record henceforth.
Stand by, Harold. I can't do an exact 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 because I got to wait for the DVD, but I'll tell you when you're on.
Okay.
3, 2.
Yeah, welcome very much to Conversations. It's a pleasure to welcome on this, what is it, August 5th of the year 2014, a dear friend of mine, Colia Clark. Colia, it's so good to see you again. You're looking grand.
Well, thank you. Harold, you know, it's always wonderful to come on, be on show with you.
Yeah.
You're so remarkable, and you're so ahead of your time. I just wait for what's Harold going to do next.
The only person I know who really thinks like that is... What's going on? We hear music.
Is that my phone or yours?
That's the phone. Well, it's your phone, yeah.
Well, hold on and let me turn off the phone.
Let it just go. Just turn it off. Anyway,
let me turn it off because
the only other entity that might demonstrate the sense that I'm really wonderful is my dog. My dog seems to think I'm wonderful every day I walk in the door. It's very reassuring. But then, anyway, so good. Darling, there's so much we can talk about. They finally ceased the horror that was going on in Gaza.
Has it ceased?
Yeah, it's ceased. It's called off as of today, I think, and it looks like the guns of August are. It's a 100th anniversary of the guns of August,
wow.
Start of the First World War. Just 2 days, the 28th was the 100th anniversary of that war that got set off.
We're facing about 2,000 deaths. God knows how many injuries.
Yeah, in Gaza now you talk.
In Gaza, and Israel had losses as well. They weren't that high, but they were losses.
No, they weren't. But what the danger is, like Barbara Tuchman wrote so well, the guns of August. They did not know when the Archduke was shot that it was the end of it was signaling the end of the empires,
yes.
You know, and everything. Yes. It was going to start this horrible First World War. And it was all unexpected and irrational. One worries about a war similar to that going on. Nothing rational about it. Mm-hmm. Nobody thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
That could set something off with what was going on. And
well, I think we have. It may not be the only thing, but I do think that the intensity of this violence and the lack of any sympathies coming from Israel. Usually, you know, you see people in the streets demonstrating or something within Israel, but you're not seeing that this time. And we had been told that there was a consensus that this was a thing to do. And worse, you know, go ahead and just get rid of them all. It's like at the beginning, the sister there who was the prime minister saying, you know, the Palestinians have to learn to love their children when you've just taken their land. You know, these people have been deprived of their land, and you're talking about them loving their children.
Well, they used to say that about the Sioux Indians and the Aboriginal people.
Well,
the black folk they brought over from, the black folk they brought over from Europe
those
and
brought
bonds.
Over and those they left behind.
Yeah,
so,
right, all the way, yeah.
But this level of violence that I see now, I don't think we have seen in quite some time. Because, you know, we're looking at Kiev, we're looking at what's happening in the Ukraine period. We're looking at, we know airplanes falling from the sky. We're looking at the increased violence in Syria, and kind of these new factions that are developing, and Al-Qaeda's. America's partner in Libya is re-emerging now on the scene.
And Libya is also falling apart.
Libya is falling apart. It's terrible. Mali, go right down the line into Algeria, and to Niger. You look next door there to that whole region around Chad. You can come on in, and you can talk about what's happening in Liberia and in her neighbor Guinea.
Now we got Ebola coming up as another little thing
on the scene. There's a rise, and very strangely, it follows the girls.
Yeah.
You know, bring our girls home is followed by Ebola. So, you know, that's just a little bit of it. And then I just learned before I came over here today that an American general has been killed in Afghanistan
today.
Me,
yes. An American general.
An American general, and also a brigadier German general was downed in Afghanistan. I don't know how many others were killed in this incident or the character of the incident.
Yeah.
But when you look at that and you look at Baghdad, and we go back to Baghdad.
Yeah, you got ISIS or ISIL.
Yeah.
I think ISIL is more threatening than ISIS. It's the Islamic State in the Levant, including Lebanon.
Oh, yes.
And remember Nasrallah.
Yes.
Nasrallah's still around in that.
Yes.
He's still there. And they used to lob missiles into Israel with alarming regularity and more than Hamas has been able to do.
Yes.
And in general, the sense of outrage among the Arab, Islamic people of the world, not less the major number, the major contingent of the human society, has been outraged by what was going on, bombing of UN displacement places and things like that.
Schools,
so
hospitals, clinics.
I think Hamas has probably gained political power over Mahmoud Abbas. I don't know. They're going to be meeting in Egypt.
Yeah, we'd be
But that area of the world, Israel in there, is probably the most dangerous area in the world, I would think. Some people might
when you look at it, I mean, it's most of Africa, especially East Africa, the Horn of Africa, Egypt. You know, when you circle all the way back around, it's quietness when you pass Algeria, that's the nation down the corner, and you don't hear much about Mauritania, but they're certainly in the game. And America has a big contingency that's in the nation there on the corner, whose name I can't pull up now. It means I'm getting old.
Morocco?
Morocco, yeah. But when you begin to look at what's happening with Africa all over, and you begin to look at the places we're not talking about, which is Central and South America, and they, with the young kids, doing something now that is absolutely the most powerful thing I have seen in recent years. It hurts my heart to send your children that the babies are coming to the border.
You mean in our country?
The babies down at the border. The border there with Mexico.
Isn't it awful? Yeah.
And that people are paying large sums of money, I'm told, you know, $4,000 and $5,000, people who have nothing.
Yeah. Well,
in order to participate in making a statement.
It's a mess down in Honduras and those countries.
Oh, yes.
Guatemala is still, you know, remember Arbenz and all that?
You know, we look at NAFTA, we look at CAFTA, we look at the destruction, we look at America, American businesses, we look at Canada, Canadian businesses, and the literal destruction of the economies of Central and South America, particularly, and the Caribbean, of course, but particularly when we look at what has happened with Central America. We don't hear anybody talking about the wars that are coming now out of the Maya region, that the Maya are launching new offenses and coming up with
the ancient Mayan culture, the Guatemala?
Yes, of course. That would be Belize, Guatemala, Mexico. Most of the whole area there, including parts of Honduras and El Salvador.
Well, where does that lead? There are a couple of little icebergs down in Antarctica that are unaffected by all this nonsense by the human society. It seems to be where
no, I'm
it's
afraid,
like a cancer spreading everywhere,
I'm afraid
like a green
not,
slime or something.
Because the environmental crisis that we're in means that nothing on this planet, as you said, we're species lethal, man, well, we are.
Well,
we're destroying the planet itself.
You think that is the case? Okay, that's a thing. I always relate that to the weapons, you know, that exist.
Yeah, but weapons are all biological weapons. Weapons are psychological weapons, because those of us who are in the nonviolence field understand the power of words, the power of these destructive scientific theories that says your brain size, the Bible said, you know, whatever. Those things are as destructive to humankind and also initiate much of what we do.
Well, why don't we back off and go back to Gaza? It's immediate. It seems to be they got the ceasefire. I guess they're talking Mahmoud Abbas or something up there in Egypt and that sort of thing. Now, there seems to be that what do they call it, mow the grass or something? They call it give them a haircut or something when they go through every couple of years to Gaza and just bomb the bejesus out of it, and still the movement of the defiance.
Yeah, but after 60 years, Harold, they have not been able to control these people, these people, whether they're on the West Bank or in Gaza, as just as defiant now as they were in 1947,
Do you think so?
48.
That
Yes.
is defiant. It seems to me they've been able to go with big league boots and do whatever they wanted in the West Bank. They're just setting settlements everywhere. They're moving into East Jerusalem.
They're doing that, but they're still the fight back.
They can do whatever they want the same way the United States government could do whatever they wanted against the Aboriginal people.
Yeah, but they're
of the
doing it
plains.
because of the United States government.
Well, the United States government is
We're
backing
the major
Israel.
player here.
Is that the history of the world, that whoever has the guns and the ability to intimidate, get the upper hand, and then they can just do whatever they want, more or less?
Pretty much, if we look at history, we see that as the evidence that is true.
Political legitimacy comes from or to, in the immediate initiation of such, setting up a new country or a new entity or something. It comes from, essentially, in a metaphor kind of way, whoever's got the biggest club can set up a system.
Whoever has the boy who has the biggest club.
The boy, yeah, the boy is a young boy or a
And
young
that's
man.
you.
yeah, but then they have the ability, and then they can endow that with creation stories. They can endow it with PR and everything to be called politically legitimate.
Right.
And there's a historical development of things, and it seems the United States is developed that way and become a great power. Do you think we have a vision that is worthy of the future in the biggest sense of the word, of being able? My man Bucky Fuller used to be an anticipatory design scientist. You're anticipating the future, and that do we have a system that is relevant to the full realization of the capability that the future offers? And then one more addendum to that. There's a difference between the reality that we see as we go out Manhattan or wherever you are, with all the buildings and things like that, and the institution thought patterns, and the capability that is developing, anticipatory design science, Mr. Fuller called it. Don't try to change people within the context. Change the environment that can allow the good to come out. Do you understand? So it's in touch in a certain chronologic way with the future, or you could say with the capability, not limited to the institutional framework that was the historical pattern out of which the future is emerging. We could be in touch with the future as a way of setting up design priorities, if you can follow all of that. What do you think?
I mean, I really don't think that we are in touch with the future. I mean, that's clearly that the technology that we're using,
You think
and
we are?
this age, that is certainly is going to. Where I stand now, where my grandchildren are, where my grandchildren are, like
Going
three
to
different
be.
worlds, but it begun in my world.
Yeah.
So we can always talk about that as an extension of this time period when we had this
Same as what
scientific
happened-
evolution that was just powerful.
Right.
Whether
And
it's
the same thing
television, radio,
happened-
technology, all of this stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, and the same thing happened between you and your grandmother.
that's correct.
Yeah, it's a historical
correct.
thing that's
That's correct.
developing. Has it come to a point of some sort of a qualitative new capability that is relevant that we don't take account of? We just think it's another phase of history, like the French Revolution or something. Do you understand?
Yeah, but those forces of continuity, speaking of the French Revolution, are always there. Now, I think that what we have to understand is if we are willing to, and I always come back to Dr. King speaking in Chicago in '66, where he says, that we've entered this age of cybernetics, and in the interim, we have to understand that we've created a new reality, in other words, this new future, but it will only work if we're willing to define the values, begin to define the values, redefine our values in this reality, because this reality will determine what that reality is, whether it will come into being as something productive and real and human or not.
Yeah, like that lot's it in that, isn't it?
Yes.
That's the challenge of the moment, in a way, how we can use, because we're surrounded by institutions and thoughts that was in one condition in terms of capability. There was no way we could have transatlantic travel in 2 hours before we had the airplane.
That's right.
It's all, the capability is evolving, and even the capability on the destructive side, which
On
seems
both
to be
sides,
the
yes.
basis of maintaining political legitimacy over the other tribe, as we do, with guns and weapons and airplanes and everything, realpolitik.
Yes.
And those weapons have become, I believe, from the modeling species, lethal.
And they
Since-
are
that's
because you
all-
got to get meaner and meaner because this mass group that you got to control is also growing and thinking.
You mean the people?
Yeah, the people of the world.
The people of the world.
And they are not playing. Because people are more and more saying, well, you know, I have nothing to lose.
Well.
And the only way you can try to control that is with these new weapons of destruction, and they won't work.
Well, the weapons of destruction apparently, and it's not only, we've had START. We had 1962. They were about to destroy Western civilization, certainly. There were a few scraggling survivors. Now we have, you know, the Trident submarines, I think have the ability almost in and of themselves to damn near, if not completely, if they're unleashed, wipe out the entire Homo sapiens species.
Sure.
Now, that's something that's new. That we've never had that capability until about, Dr. King spoke in 1966.
66, yes.
And he spoke in 1967 at Riverside Church against the Vietnam in very strong terms.
Yeah, well, he says, you know, he's
and it's only been about
breaking the silence of his heart.
It's only been about 1970 that the weapons have become species lethal, according to a great deal of modeling. And there's probably a lot of research going on, particularly in germ warfare, black ops, and things like that, that add to the fact that we've gotten some start and some countdown on the weapons, I mean the thermonuclear weapons and so forth, that contain that capability that didn't exist in 1900 or any time before now, if you understand.
I understand what you're saying.
That's an existential nuke relative at the level of capability.
Yeah. I think that once the nuclear piece entered the scene in 45, and of course with the Russians being running in within 5 to 7 years later with their versions, I think that that spawned another whole madness in terms of thinking about destruction of planet Earth. Because I remember talking with Babu, who was an ambassador who would come into the UN every year out of Tanzania, and he lived at Zanzibar, but he was well, that is Tanzania.
Yeah, Tanzania. They almost called it Tanzibar.
Right. He talked about that.
That would have been like a Mars bar, candy bar.
Yeah, Persia. I mean, the Persian Empire would have been added to all that. Yeah. But he was talking, he said, I'm not interested in no nuclear weapons. And I said, why not? He said, why should we be afraid? He said, because if one of those fools pulls it off, the whole world's gone. It doesn't matter. I mean, but at that time, you know, it seemed like, well, you know, it might damage a part of the world, but it won't be the whole world. But he was probably correct, you know.
Well, I don't think it'd be the whole world now. No, there'd be protozoa and things like that. The life, you can't destroy life.
Well, no. Human world is what we're talking about.
Well, that's different than life, of course.
Yes,
and life goes on. Yes. We're only here just on the top.
There'll be life forms no matter what, because matter cannot be destroyed. So the order will go on, but it'll go on without us.
Well, I know 99.9% of all species that have ever existed have gone extinct in the evolutionary process. Maybe we are at our own hands in a position where we can write our own ticket of extinction through some sort of guns and augers thing, and that's what worries you about the Middle East particularly. The feelings are so strong. There's so much implacability on both sides that some little something, it was the shooting of an archduke that set it off.
Yes.
The worst war that ever there had been in Europe and everything. It was horrible, the First World War and everything. And the same thing could happen here, except that if it sets it off, and then you don't think it's nothing to do with rational, it's got nothing to do with rational, real polity, economic interests or anything. It would just let one bomb go into Tehran or something, and then I can't stand that, and then, you know, they got a couple hundred, and then, you know what I mean, it could set that off, and that's a thing that ought to be of concern.
Well, it ought to be a major concern to us, especially since it's always set in this kind of biblical context. The Middle East, very biblical, you know. Armageddons of the world.
Well, they're fighting right on the scale. I think in the valley of Armageddon now.
Yes, that's
in the geographical place where Armageddon exists.
You heard what I said.
They're setting up bleachers there for the Christians, you know, to come and watch the Battle of Armageddon. They expect to see chariots or something, you know. The Valley of Armageddon is identified, and I think they're setting up bleachers for the tourists.
Yes. Well,
I'm sorry. I'm being
my sadness about the Gaza piece is that the United States of America, its government, its media.
Well, I want to talk about media.
They have really pushed this media.
Yeah.
Has pushed the rest of the world to a point where they're saying, you know, America itself is the problem.
Well, I think...
Not just because we're funding Israel, but because our very propaganda coming from the President of the United States downward, that we have folk demonstrating and leaving work from national agencies, state agencies, county and city agencies in support of Israel. For what reason? What's going on with this? So we have to begin to ask that, because that is why the world called us the ugly American. Remember the ugly American?
Of course, yeah. I forget
well,
who
we're
wrote
the
it,
ugly Americans. Aeons ago, I've forgotten to. But that's why we were the ugly Americans.
Yeah. Well, I think we were in a powerful role, and so if somebody's in the powerful role, there will be people who take exception to the people who are in power when they're not, that kind of thing. They call it the British ugly.
Oh, yeah, the British were always
they
ugly.
Were.
They still are ugly. Because when I see America, I see British. I don't see
the arrogance of power.
Yeah, that is this is the British. I mean, we're still the British. I mean, we need to get real about that. But the thing that I think is very, very important for the rest of us who are citizens of the United States, I'm going to be traveling to Iran.
I know. Oh, you are?
To an international cultural festival.
You've talked with
and I will be delivering a paper on Haiti when I'm there.
You talked with Ardashir and that? Ardashir Oman?
No, I haven't. I got an invitation from the festival itself.
Yeah, okay.
And they are, they're paying for everything and taking care of it. But
good.
I have to go into this place where we spend 90% of our time when we mention it, thinking about how to destroy it in one way or the other.
Well, I don't, but there are people who do.
I'm talking now.
Netanyahu's got a real fixation on that,
Yes,
and that's very worrying.
That in Syria. I mean, this is very problematic for a little nation that's sitting on, about a couple of hundred bombs, atomic bombs?
Yeah.
A little speck in the desert?
It could be that they might become besieged.
Yeah.
That would be very, very worrying.
Oh, the 1967 and the 6-Day War. I mean, you think we'd have another one of those? That would be very troublesome.
Well, what you're worried about is a spark that would set off the unleashing.
I think it's unleashed. Yeah. I think that this recent incident with Gaza and the West Bank has now awakened an entire world.
Well,
in a way that Israel has set up the innocent, which are most of the Jews in the United States. Because most of the Jews I know don't see themselves as being tied to Israel in any way. They do not see themselves as being...
There are a number that are.
Oh, yes, they are.
And you saw the people in Israel, 95% were all in favor of bombing the bejesus out of Gaza.
That's what I'm saying.
Because they're on the spot.
Yeah, but that sets up a new age of assaults upon that group, which is very unfortunate. It's unfortunate that our president doesn't understand that, that our Congress and our governors and whoever else doesn't understand that reality for a small group of people on planet Earth. A powerful little group of people because of their the ability to not only affect the economy, but they have affected media, they have affected the intellectual world and religion. So, because, that's the same people.
Just to mention
those are Jesus' people.
Just a few of the lesser institutions.
That's
the politics,
right.
the
You heard what I said?
and the religion.
Those are Jesus' people.
And when it was in the middle of it, Mr. Obama went to California for some fundraisers out there among some of the Hollywood and everything, and people criticized him for that. But he probably did that in recognition that I don't think it's possible politically for him to come out stringently, or at the initial stage of such a thing going on, without risking absolute loss of the Democratic Party in the, let's say, the congressional election coming up. It's very real that there's a possibility the Republicans will take over the Senate.
Yes, it is.
It would be disastrous in terms of anything that's going to benefit in a material way. So political calculation is that the influence of the Jewish apex side, of the Jewish lobby and all of that, is so powerful that you almost can't, in politically realistic terms, go against it.
I think the KKK even came out for the bombing of Gaza.
You remember the KKK?
No, I'm being very real here.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I still don't believe that I went through the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I said, am I in the real world?
Yeah.
I got very nervous.
You mean during this Gaza
I was already ill.
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
doing
yeah,
this, and I got my president coming out making the statement, and, McCain on the Republican side, and McGovern, all of them are coming out making statements saying what? We support, I said, oh my God.
Well, we support, and it's propaganda.
Are you crazy?
Yeah.
But it may be propaganda. But the world, this
World
new media.
Yeah.
Now the new media
has hooked
the world up in a way in which the whole world can see us clearer now. They couldn't see us clearer in the past.
Well,
they were focused on our glamour, our clothes, and our wealth.
Yeah.
But they can see us clearly
And
now.
I think they could have let that. In the old days, they would let it go if there was no media, if there was no wider world to taking it there as they slew the Indian tribes in North America. Right. Nobody knows. To hell with it. Nobody can know. There's no way to report. You don't have anything, and everything. But now the media and the fact that you've got this new media.
Yes.
I'm going to mention that now, if you don't mind. Go talking about the media. Yeah. We're in media in a way here and everything. But the new media is there, and it seems that. And let's just bring it up to date in terms of this fellow that got killed recently by the New York police, Garner.
Mr. Garner.
It was captured on video, and the police are attacking and trying to make it illegal for people to take pictures of the police, and yet those pictures, Rodney King.
Yes.
If Rodney King had just said, I got beat up, that would have gone nowhere.
That's correct.
It would be a newspaper report. It wouldn't. The newspapers are no longer the medium of record.
That's correct.
Nor is even television. It's too just immediate. And I got to think, let me give you a quote, if you mind.
No, go ahead. No,
it's just talking about new media.
I think it's very important that the
this
world
fellow,
uses...
This is a book, Paul Levinson. I just had a chance to read it at our picnic. I was there, and he's a major guy. He was real close friends with McLuhan. He knew, and he's a professor. He's written on media, the digitalization and all that. He wrote a book in 1909 called New Media, and that's like what they call these days social media. And he's brought it up to date in 2012, and I was reading it, and it was something really interesting to me because he was saying, we used to talk about the London Times as the newspaper of record. We talked about the New York Times, the medium, of record, and it would be print, or we had the Congressional Digest and things like that. Print is no longer the medium of record in his way of, and that what's coming is we had radio, and then we had television, and then we had cable, and then we have this new media thing going, and it's going exponential, inexorably toward more and more ability to have close to the capturing of reality as we experience it going through the world multisensorily. That's essentially what's going on, multimedia. And he said, he's got an interesting sentence in here. I would read it. I think it's really meaning. I may be wrong, but I think it's the case. He says, it's interesting. You got a little sentence, a throwaway line or something, but I think it ought to be, it says, television increasingly counts only in the immediate run. It's on television, the guy sinks the putt, okay, but it's immediate, okay? Network television, the networks and all that they want to pay big money to get ad on for an election or selling cornflakes or something, but whatever. In the immediate run. In the short, medium, and long runs, YouTube has become the medium of record. YouTube, the medium of record. There's description of why what makes it that way and everything, but the way in which we're going to be keeping track of the record, as it were, is going to be YouTube. YouTube is free to anybody. They can put up things. The world is being imbued with little cell phones where you can make video.
Yes.
And you can put them up on YouTube. YouTube is no longer the New York Times or the Congressional Record or television. They're all, and those are all ad-based kind of economic models and that kind of stuff. But YouTube is the model.
Yes.
Is the, as he puts it, is becoming the medium of record. That's very interesting for us here in public access. In a certain sense, I would submit, we got a thing saying public access and so on. I think it's multimedia. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And let's talk about this fellow. We can remember Rodney King. Got beat up by the Los Angeles.
Yeah, I can remember Rodney King, and I can remember that massive marches across Albany, up and down those steep hills, and a brother being lynched there, Joseph Coyne, that evening at Albany, New York. His case still unresolved. And the police attempt to cover up, and
they've been able to.
The national and international exposure on that.
Yeah, but now you're going to cover up also the malfeasance or the inappropriate organization of the system writ large.
That's correct.
Now, one other thing, if I could add to it, right? Have you been aware of Thomas Piketty? Yeah,
No,
I mentioned
him
it to you,
earlier.
right?
No, I don't know.
In our circles, it wouldn't be so well known, but he had a book that came out, I don't know, a couple months ago or so, #1 bestseller above all the potbelly romance novels or whatever makes up for the best sales on New York Times. #1 bestseller, and it is being read by virtually the entire world establishment, including Barack Obama and all of the leaders of the political system and all the leaders of the International Monetary Fund and all the leaders of the United Nations and the multinational corporations, the investment bankers, with great chagrin. They're reading it seriously. And its thesis is that they have this economic system in place. The overall thing is very dense, and it's not to be read by us. But it's taken seriously by the people who can, and they're very worried. It's beginning to be a system where they're maybe going to be able to, in the words of William Shakespeare, hoist the capitalist system worldwide on its own petard.
The death of capitalism.
The what?
The death of capital. The death of capitalism.
The debt, not necessarily. Well, it hoisted on its own petard, and you don't do that if you got any sense of responsibility. You don't cavalierly cast off or cast and say we're just poof going to do away with the system. The system works. Planes go. Buses come, food gets delivered, the food chain works. I mean, it's working. You don't cavalierly think about challenging it in a way where it's going to be all drugged down and we'll all be happy socialists or some sort of thing that a lot of people might think. It's irresponsible. You're going to have to deal with history. You're going to have to deal with the history, but they're very worried. And the theme is that we got a tremendous capability, and it's growing inexorably, and it's in the level of latent capability that we have, that we've never dreamed of in the past. And it's coming inexorably and exponentially. The capability to provide material, let's just talk materialism. I mean, there's other thoughts, but also intellectual and so forth. Abundance for all human beings. We're heading for 10 billion for all human beings and the ecology. We're developing, every day comes something over the transom new in every field, you notice? So we're coming to a point of a qualitative capability that the system, since, I'm going to just finish, but you can see the exponential development with all the new media coming in terms of information technology. It's not going to stop. It's just going to keep going exponential, which it just goes like, and that it's also going in robotics. The robotics are now coming to be where, and algorithmically, you can get rid of all kinds of service things where people in a bureaucracy are clicking box 3 or 4, it can be done algorithmically. YouTube can check on a piece of people you put up there algorithmically right to the 2 sentences that are under copyright in a 15-hour thing you put up. It's just done algorithmically. Nobody's doing it. But it's so they're displacing human activity in terms of creating the material world. And they don't have a way of distributing, because they're all tied into that the only way you can get that for the mass of the people is for them to have what is called a job. a labor function in a condition where the production is all being contained within an automated system of production that can produce an overwhelming abundance for all, but they don't have the way in the traditional systems that we've inherited, they're all around us in our architecture and everything else, to distribute effective buying power into the hands of the people to be able to make it so they can clear the market of what can be produced in a living way.
We got the way, but they don't have the will.
Well, no, they don't have the vision. So
that's because you don't have the will.
Well, not necessarily.
I don't think they're willing to do it.
With due respect, honey, I think we're all in that ball. I don't think there's enough blame to go around all over the place because we're all locked into. History is a nightmare. We're all locked into it, and it's hard. Galileo said we're not the center of the universe. They only let him off the hook, the Catholic Church, 12 years ago for saying we weren't the center of the universe, which obviously we were, and the knowledge was known. Do you understand?
Sure.
Ideas and institutions that people get their identity wrapped up in, they say their job role. That's their identity. And if you have a system that's going to violate or is going to undercut the means by which people had a sense of identity, you're in deep trouble politically because that creates violence and at the interface. So this book, Piketty, is being read by all the world leadership now. And it may be the means by which you could hoist the system, capitalism, on its own petard. And it's being read not by you and me or socialists or no, it's not. You know, by the people.
Yeah,
it is, but it's a bestseller. It's so bestseller, and it's being read by the president and the major people who make up the establishment of the capitalist order here, China, everywhere.
Sure.
So there may be a moment of truth coming in terms of they're just saying, just do what you're told, like they have, and they got 200,000 years of human history where the only reason that anybody did anything because somebody with a big club made them do it. Do you understand? All the ironclad laws of scarcity. There's not enough. Whoever's got, and it was just who could hit who on the head better of power.
For those that we talk about. But you know, I really, I'm back to where I started when I said the will. And what I mean here is that we have to be willing to address this issue because it can be done.
Which issue now?
The issue when we're talking about hoisting capitalism up on this petard.
That's William Shakespeare.
Yeah, we're at that point where we have to begin to say that labor has to be redefined.
Thank you.
And until we can do that, and that's the unwillingness, but that's not the unwillingness from the masses. The masses would be willing to give up this job any day.
Well, Job.
That's what we call it.
Job.
Do you got a job?
Yeah.
You're long-suffering, you know, painful thing to do.
I talked with Alton Maddox the other day. I love Alton. I love Alton Maddox. He said, it was hot out in those cotton fields with the sun beating down on your neck.
That's
it wasn't
right.
no fun.
Early in the morning telling me it was cold.
You're emancipated. Yeah.
Cold in the morning and about 6:30, the heat is burning you up. I know I was in those gun fields.
And I cannot imagine those guys who drug those big stones across the hot desert in Egypt to build those friggin' pyramids loved doing it.
They didn't do it. They just sat there and wished them across.
No, they had to do it because...
No, wished them across.
Oh, no, yeah. No, you know what I'm saying. It's just been a few always had the political control, and they would conquer, and then they would enslave, and it still goes on. The paradigm is still there. It's except we got the power, you will do what you're told, damn it.
Except in Kemet, Pharaoh had to do the first work of the day for himself.
How is that? Is that true?
Yeah, that's the law. That is the religious law of the land. It's a work.
Was that down Sudan?
It's a work state.
Was that down Sudan?
It was from Sudan, I'm sure, all the way up to Kemet itself. And if Nehru is right,
where was it? Where is Kemet?
What we call Egypt today.
Oh, Egypt.
That's old
okay,
Kemet.
okay, all right, okay, yeah.
And if Nehru is correct when he reflects in his autobiography back on the ceremony that they had to do each year in India, every year his people, the group that he comes from, would face Egypt of Kemet. You know, he talks about the West and political geography, the West turning everything on its head and turning it around. But they would face it. And in Egypt, they would all face southward to presumably what we would be Sudan, Nubia, parts of Ethiopia, into Uganda. Because you got to go to that great sea where the wall of, because you had the wall of the ruler. And the wall of the ruler would have gone at least to what we call the Great Lake Victoria, whatever. It's been destroyed these days too. But when you began to think about Egypt and that. And you come back, though, to Gaddafi. And, and coming in and that banner across the road there that says,
Partners, not wage earners.
Not wage earners.
Yeah, right.
You know, then we think about Walter Reuther.
Yeah.
A week or two before his death, saying that the unions in this country had to begin to talk about becoming partners with business. And of course, he was out here like that.
Well, they never did bargain for ownership.
No, they're bad.
They could have bargained for ownership rather than just another wage increase, but they didn't.
No, they didn't. Because
partly because the left, I would think the left, or us, we have to be hoist on our own petard.
Yeah, but
by accepting principles that no longer hold, like the labor theory of value.
That's right.
That's informed the whole economic process.
And that's because we're right back to what you said earlier, and that is we're holding on to all of this stuff from yesterday, because it's hard to give up yesterday.
Absolutely it is, particularly when it's a qualitative, not just a quantitative.
Sure.
If it's a quantitative change, you're going to get a new way to grow raspberries or something, you know, it's quantitative. But if it's qualitative, like is coming now, then we got to be thinking really big. We need a whole new way of thinking about what's it all about, Alfie, in a large-scale way. And it's not the intellectuals have been co-opted. The intellectual community.
No, yeah, it's owned.
No, it's been done by their own. They've gone like the universities and that sort of thing.
Sure.
They've practically eliminated systems thinking. You know, where you're thinking about the whole. You know, start with the universe, start with the physics and all that. Understand it. Think systems, pattern recognizing between a bunch of different disparate things, and everything goes towards highly specialized. It's like divide and conquer the intellectual community.
You remember the warning from Fulbright?
What was that?
And the arrogance of power.
Yeah,
when he talks about the college campuses.
Does he? Yeah.
And being invaded by the federal government and federal agencies and whatever.
Well, that could be for propaganda purposes.
But the use, I can remember SUNY Albany more than I can anything else. You know, that all of a sudden they were on, and there was a reorganization of everything. But they just wasn't the local government, because we were talking now, Central Intelligence had, I came in where I used to have my UN papers. I had a desk there loaded with UN papers, and I came in one morning, and everything had been moved.
You were a professor there?
Yeah, I was the adjunct professor.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And it was the most frightening thing for the moment, because it gave me a wake-up call. Of course, I was gone in less than 2 years, too. They got me out of there.
Yeah.
But I would come to the United Nations because I sat on an NGO for South Africa, the American South African People's Friendship Association.
Good for you.
And
Would that
so
be Mandela still in?
Well, that was when Mandela was still in jail.
In jail, yeah.
Yeah, we were still.
Robbins Island, right?
And many others, the PAC people who are in the Pan-African Congress folk who are not talked about. Subukwe, who didn't get the fortune of Mandela, because they put him in that little house out there and killed him. Because he's Sharpsville, that's PAC.
Yeah, Sharp.
We often are confused PAC's work with ANC. And then followed by, and Biko in the spirit of Subukwe, who founded PAC. You know, that's what that was like his father, parent in his eyes, in terms of where he, and Winnie Mandela too in many ways, connected to Subukwe and that great movement that produced Sharpsville and the aftermath, and of course the call for war. Coming out of the PAC, not the ANC.
Mandela was such an overarching example.
Well, he was made that in the international media.
An angel.
Yeah, the international media made him what he is.
He could have come out very violent and
but he made his peace before he came out.
Anyway,
I don't want to get into that, because I think that's another whole show, and maybe we should ask Lyman Mombasa, some of the characters from PAC, the young ANC, some of them come sometime to talk about where South Africa is headed. But the thing that I wanted to say is that, you know, this call for war by that group, but back to this issue of where we stand now in human history, because Haiti has had a 4% increase, I understand, in its economy this year. Yet the people of Haiti are poorer than ever.
Yeah, right.
The poverty is increasing. The restrictions and the repression from the federal government is increasing. And yet it had 4.6% increase in its economy. But for whom?
That's what, gross domestic product or something kind of. And it can be just it's growth overall. And what it is people living in palaces.
That's right.
But it's growth.
That's right.
And then if you divide it up, but the people, it's still whoever owns the assets are getting all the wealth. And the distribution of wealth in this country is absurd.
That's right. And the
it's
poor get poorer.
absurd. There's about 3 people on the top or something, and everybody else is wallowing around in the mud, more or less like serfs in a feudal estate.
And they play games with us called middle class, and we hold on to those things.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not to talk about
and
because
you
they play
got your
this game.
identity
You
wrapped
got to
up
get
in
to the middle class. It's this middle class.
Well, it's
What
fair
middle
enough.
class?
I don't think it's enough. Somebody said, Marx in 48 or said 18. He said, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Now, I think it's not enough for us, given this age of abundance that is emerging. There are new technologies. They got new building materials that are 1,000 times the strength of steel and weigh practically nothing. Nanotechnology. It's coming in every field. The capability is absolutely staggering in terms of the positiveness of it. And so it may be the overarching system. Fuller wanted to get an operating manual for spaceship. We don't have a vision of it other than contained within the outdated institutions, which are virtually all. Architecturally, institutional structures, thought patterns, and everything. And so it's a time not just of a quantitative change, like a different tax bill or something, but a qualitative change, almost evolutionary. Almost evolutionary. We're 200,000 years, and we get to a point where we can liberate the entire Homo sapiens species and its growth patterns, 10 billion, in a way of having not only the needs, but the reasonable wants. Everybody should have an automobile. Everybody should have air conditioning in the summer. Everybody should have the comforts that can be done, and done with good design without polluting the environment and the ecology. We can do that by structuring things that allows us to realize our capability. And we don't have that yet. It's all reified institutions that are outdated.
And you said everybody should have an automobile, but what we really saying is everybody should be
transportation.
Transportation. They should be mobile, sure.
Right.
But not everybody needs them. We don't need the ones we got because they're destroying what? That ozone layer out there.
Well, I submit.
The carbon emission.
The things that we could do that would avoid that.
Sure, it is.
Yeah, there are things
that means we don't need it without putting it. In other words, they're cramming up space on the road. 10 billion. That means we need more and more space for what? To live in. And then, of course, there's all this modern new way of building houses.
I don't think it's so unreasonable. Let's see if you take all the people in the world and you got, let's say, a living space of 3,000 square feet for everybody. You could figure it out. There's lots of room. You could build stuff. You could have a decent living for everybody.
Yeah, that's correct.
Where they don't have to do anything for it. Now the question
will be, they are doing something for it because they're adding to the cultural whatever.
Well, the cultural heritage
and they're also continuing the political piece. They're continuing to be our thinkers. None of that stops. And that is what's frightening people. People need to understand you don't stop thinking. You don't stop doing creative things. Your science won't stop.
No.
But
all the
we
opposite.
do not have to be slaves. We do not have that job and be a slave to labor anymore.
Well, yeah, but the major thing that people have to think about is what am I would think of something. We can just ruminate, right?
Sure
think about the human condition now. Everybody in the world, all the people at all classes and that kind of stuff. What is the major thought or the major focus of attention that is given attention in terms of human thought now in this year is 2014, the Christian era. I would submit money.
Yes.
It seems to be the only thing that is coming down to the bottom line is either I got to do it or I'm going to be homeless, I'm going to be destitute, or I got to get more or something. And it's because we don't have a system where people can think. Can you imagine thinking in a system where nobody has to think about money?
Yes, I can.
So they could think about things like
I've
taking
been
care of
imagining since I was a child.
Yeah, no, taking care.
It ain't real.
No, it's not. But it's potential for that.
Sure, it is.
So we couldn't have done that in the 19th century. We couldn't have done it in 1950. We couldn't have done it in 1990. We can do it henceforth, and we have to have a liaison with the future, a liberated future, where people will be concerned with the things that matter, like art and poetry and thinking and leisure and family and all the good things that aren't allowed because everybody's out there trying to make sure that they don't get eaten up by an economic system that still sees them as a slave, that they have to be a slave, compliant to a system in order to exist and get that money. Now, can you imagine? I can see it. I can certainly see it coming within a couple of generations.
It's going to come.
That this thing that is everything is going to become nothing. Because if you
it's going to come whether we like it or not.
If you have what you have to have a comfortable life, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah. The world is pushing in that direction.
That's something we could go if we had a system that allowed us to operate and tap into that future and have a way for the masses of the people to tap into the future rather than being enslaved to all the past prejudices that have informed the past that are reified in our institutions at this moment. And we can liberate the human society within an ecological context through good design. We have the capability, or we can eliminate the Homo sapiens species at this moment and this generation at this time. As Asimov said, this is the defining moment in history, not in historical terms, but in larger terms. And it's not being brought up by any of our leaderships, intellectual or political,
but I think
government.
There's an awakening happening as America begins from Homeland Security. It's increasing the police force. And I was listening at the police, president of the police union today, when the reference one to Ghana, they talked about some woman, and I haven't been keeping up the news because I've been ill, but some sister somewhere in town.
You
I'm
okay?
fine, I'm
good,
fine.
Good.
Some sister in town was drugged from her apartment in her underwear.
Yeah.
Police went to knock on the door. This was this past week.
Yeah.
Knock on the door, and she opens her door, and they drag her out. You know, she refused to be arrested, but she said, "What do you do? No, I haven't done anything. What's up?"
Oh.
Somebody had reported some child abuse. They had the wrong apartment.
Yeah, right. That
But
happened.
here is a president of a police union.
Was it a lady of color?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I could scream.
I mean, here's a president of the police union who goes on to say that she should have just agreed to be arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about that.
Yeah.
I thought, open my door up, and there are policemen standing at my door,
Yeah.
and they tell me that I'm under arrest.
Uh-huh.
Do I agree to be arrested? Why is there thinking that I should agree to be arrested?
Yeah.
And then I thought about Homeland Security. I thought about this increase in the police forces around this country. I thought about them hiring police from outside of the country who would not be sensitive to the needs, as they hire people from outside of black and brown communities who are not sensitive to yellow needs and yellow communities or brown needs. As inside, and now you hire them from outside.
Yeah.
They won't be sensitive to anybody's needs.
Yeah.
But we are becoming into a police state, and the police state is the attempt to halt this mind, this human mind that's moving to this new level that we're talking about. Because it's going to go there. Whether they like it or not, we're going there.
Well, I hope
ain't no doubt about it, Harold. We're either going there or we'll destroy the planet.
Yeah.
Because the human beings are wicked.
Don't we need something new at the level of understanding? What is it that's overarching the principles that are there? I mean, what we need vision. We
Yes.
need vision. And we don't have comprehensive vision or the means of displaying. We don't have a pattern. All we have are reified political propaganda talking points for different ways
That's
of which
right.
my system's better than yours, or you're messing with me, and all of that. We don't have a vision that begins to engage the human consciousness.
We're refusing to allow the young and the old as well who have those visions.
Well, I don't see
to
them in the young. I don't see them in our intellectual leadership. I don't see them in our political
we're
leadership.
that the whole block on the education, the purposeful illiteracy in the United States, it's purposeful. This is a purposeful illiteracy.
You think so?
Well, I grew up in Mississippi where they took words out of the, liberty, freedom, hell, they weren't even there.
Nobody needs those words.
The Constitution of our Mississippi State Constitution
I know,
declared it
girl.
illegal.
I hear you.
Tell me something about freedom.
It's a joke.
So
It's
tell
so
a Negro
funny.
about no freedom. Tell a Negro about freedom, and she will tear up the town.
Yeah, right.
And so that is what's happening. So that when we look at what the quality of the education, when we look at the programmed education, it's all programmed away from allowing the young mind, or the mind, because a young mind may be somebody 90, older, to really grasp the realities that are before us, to come to where you say these great thinkers are at this moment, and say this is where we go from here, to get a green book. These thinkers who we're trying to
green
destroy.
Book, you mean Gaddafi's green book?
Gaddafi, yeah.
Gaddafi was ahead of history's curve. I think he was. Yeah.
Sure he is.
Yeah,
And these thinkers out of the Middle East, West Asia, Nehru would probably say West Asia. So Nehru's West Asia, and North Africa, and other parts of Africa and Europe, or wherever they're coming from, who are talking about moving away from the present economic system to something that's new, but not moving to the communism or socialism as we have been defining it, but taking labor itself and redefining it and taking it to a new level. The young thinkers are there, and I know they're there. I know that thought is there, and we're holding it back.
Well,
but we also need to begin to
They might be able to recognize it if it were presented. They're more in a position to be able to recognize that. The younger you are, you can recognize the validity of the new thing being proposed, but the thing is not being proposed by any of our leadership.
That's right, and what it's
doing there's no vision,
and it's destroying the young who tell you in a minute ain't nothing to live for. They will tell you that.
I don't think.
Why you say that, young person?
I don't think it's consciously done. It's just being by drift. And,
I think it's conscious, Harold.
If it
for communities of color, it is conscious.
Oh yeah. Oh well, yeah.
Because that spark that came in the '60s that nobody was expecting.
I know. '70 was a major point.
It wasn't a Negro movement.
It
was a people's movement of the '60s that just happened to be led at that point by people of color.
That's right.
So when we look at by color, I don't want to use that anymore.
No,
because
use it.
Well,
I know what
it's an imperial term that refers to that minimizes groups. But for the Africans and those people from Central and South America, whatever they call themselves, and the Asians and the whites and the reds who built, they're the wretched of the earth.
Yeah, that was
who built the 1960s all over this world.
Yeah, right.
For those people.
Yeah, right.
We caught them off guard.
Yeah.
And what did they do to the communities that came in and threw in drugs and violence and new laws that are unbelievably frightening?
Yeah.
In order to try and halt it. You can't halt history because it will come, the forces of history come whether you want them or not. They're like a giant flood that will push their way in like a tsunami, knock down all your walls, and something new will arise. Job is going to die, and we're going to have a new era.
Job, yeah, okay. And apropos of that, if I may, we only got a couple minutes left, is that I think the youth would be able to recognize it if it were presented. I take heart in this Mr. Thomas Piketty and the fact that system is being hoisted on its own petard by its own leaders. They're going to have to lose confidence in GDP and all the things they've done, and it ought to be done by us too.
Yes.
And then we ought to get to something new. And if something new emerges, it's going to be done on the what Paul Levinson recognizes as the medium of the record, YouTube. That's available to everybody. So the good idea that gets
everybody
up there can go viral. It can go travel, and that's the medium of record. That's we in public access. One thing about YouTube is it's totally free of any costs. You don't have to be a millionaire and pay a great big advertising budget or any of that. None of that. That makes it new and unique. And in public access is one place where you can go and you can make television, and you can make it and not have to. You can if you want. It's the old way, and it's the thing you're used to. But if you don't ever have to think about money.
Yes.
Now that's thought of as subversive to the American way.
Yes.
Or the world way.
Well, the world way.
But that is also linked into YouTube. YouTube's part of Google.
Yes.
And they got safeguards against everything. They got copyright. They can do algorithmically. It's the public access and YouTube are joined at the hip, and that is the medium of record. I think Paul Levinson's right on that, so that's no small matter. It's a matter of communicating those ideas that are going to have to emerge. But one thing we're going to have to do is get to our credits, because we've come to the end of time for this program.
Well, I just want the world to know that I am for public access. Let's take it on higher.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
Let's give it power. Yes. Thank you, Hannah. I always love you.
My queen.
I love you, yes.
Colia Clark, happy to have presented your position. We'll come back again tomorrow. Appreciate if you could run those credits maybe. And then thanks a lot, Colia, for everything. We got to keep meeting like this. Glad to know you're going to do some traveling in behalf of the better world that you've always been firing. Best memory of Stokely Carmichael, Kwame
Oh, I love my
Ture, a
Kwame,
great guy
yes,
and everything.
yes, yes.
So thanks for viewing. We're coming back again.
And H. Brown's out of jail, by the way.
Okay, okay.
Well, he's not out. I mean, at least they took him to
Well,
a
I guess there's nothing left to say, so we'll say good night, we'll see, or good afternoon, we'll see you tomorrow. Actually, there's a whole lot more to be said. Let's say it.
Yeah, because we're going to talk about what we need to be doing, and I'm going to say that, is taking these works that you have read, Levinson, whoever,
Paul's
and
good.
gathering with young people of all ages, young people and young in mind and young in body and spirit, and beginning to hold those community sessions where people can begin to understand what's being said and then to break it down and talking about that in relationship to public access and how we move this piece forward and keep it living, because that's been the fault of the left. We wait for the big guy up here. We call them the big guy. They really are small.
Well, the left's also all caught up on the labor theory of value because they want to get political power by celebrating how wonderful it is to work on Mass's estate. And, and so they got to be we got to be hoist on our own petard, being bought into that propagandistic thing. That's my way of seeing things.
So we get the young people together. We begin to get a new thinking.
Yeah.
And
let's get a couple of old folks in too. Let's get down to the old folks' home. They may come
That's
up
what I'm
with
saying.
something.
I mean,
everybody in on
because everybody in on it. It's the ages. I mean, because the mind in itself. It's what will make the change. And so the mind is